Volume 1 of ANIMETA, despite taking a while to really come into its own, is still a pretty fun and promising read. Its premise has definitely been done before, of course. Instantly I think of My Hero Academia. They both feature a newbie learning the ropes of an industry they so desperately want to be a part of, despite themselves being behind on their peers. They are also who we mainly want to root for in the story, potentially because we see ourselves in them and root for them more so because of this. I guess my complaint with a lot of the works in this genre, however, is that the main characters can often come across as Mary Sues. As well as that, despite not knowing anything about what they're doing, they sometimes pick it up in rocket speed and quickly surpass everyone else who's been doing it much longer. Sometimes because they're the chosen one, sometimes just cause. As well as despite them obviously being behind, their teachers / mentors still only ever give them praise. What I'm glad to say, however, is that thankfully ANIMETA doesn't do this, which is kind of funny to say, because our protagonist, Miyuki Sanada, doesn't really progress too much in the first volume. This definitely comes across as a massive breath of fresh air to me, and definitely makes me have to give the mangaka praise because of this realistic portrayal. For example, when learning to do cleanup, she's told by one of her mentors, Fuji, who serves as an in-between checker, that doing a cleanup should only take her half an hour at most. It's taken Miyuki 2, and by the end of the first volume, she's still only getting it done in an hour and 7 minutes. Her mentors don't sugarcoat anything either. I probably laughed at moments I shouldn't have because of this. Still, her mentors don't come across as assholes, as they are definitely both having to make a bet that Miyuki's unique attention to detail and overwhelming passion for anime and its animation will outweigh her fairly lackluster skill set. They also both help to motivate Miyuki in their own unique ways as well. For example, Fuji gives her advice to better her work and is also assumedly leaving purple notes to further guide and help push Miyuki. However, these are never confirmed to be from her. When Miyuki does mention them to Fuji, she seems to quickly either brush them off and just not understand what Miyuki is talking about. So, it's also possibly someone else who I'll mention later on in the video. Kujo also helps to motivate Miyuki as well, by introducing her to Team 7 towards the end of the volume, the same team who worked on her favourite fictionalised anime, Ryogo Panacotta, and who she'll be working with as well eventually. And so this serves as a great reveal, as while her character doesn't start out as that mind-blowing, she's the typical main character you'd expect in this kind of story. Again, think of Deku from My Hero Academia. It did actually surprise me how invested I got in her story despite this, even feeling myself slightly tear up as she's watching an emotional scene in the anime towards the end of the novel, where she definitely needs something to push her to carry on. Because of this investment, I'd say that the mention of reveal doesn't come across as cliche, at least definitely not in any negative connotation of the word. Instead, it serves as a good payoff for the first volume. The art style fits the theme of the manga well, but for the most part isn't that amazing either, except for the fictionalised anime I mentioned, which definitely does pop out at you. So hopefully, as we see more glimpses of this fictionalised side of the story and of the animation process itself, then we can see more of the mangaka's artistic potential, as the realisticness of the main story does restrict this quite a bit. In this way, the manga does remind me of Keep Your Hands Off Izouken and how phenomenally it handled this approach as well. My favourite characters design-wise has to be Fuji and Kujo, leaving a whole lot of questions that don't need to be answered. Miyuki's design is okay. Like her personality, it just kinda does the job. She looks how you expect this kind of character to look. Really, her personality and looks being so stereotypically centred around this trend of character does discourage you a bit, as it feels like the mangaka is just aiming for the bare minimal, which isn't a good thing to say about a main character. She can also be painfully oblivious sometimes. While this works alright as a joke, be it a played out and predictable one, it does still make you wonder how committed she actually was to animation in the first place, considering how she hasn't done that much research. This was probably a decision made on behalf of general audiences who'd understandably not know much about the inner workings of animation either, but still, from a story writing perspective, this does pull you out of it a bit, as it does come across to an extent unbelievable. I mean, you'd really expect her to at least somewhat research the inner workings of animation, understandably not to an extent where she magically has years of experience in all fields, but still enough to principally know what each process means, as she does seem to know a lot about those actively involved in animation and obviously really wants a job in the industry, so it does come across as kinda too dumb when she doesn't know what in-between frames and keyframes mean. You could suggest that Miyuki herself serves as a mouthpiece for the audience, who themselves could be unknowledgeable but potentially hoping to get into the industry as well, but it would have been made more effective still if Miyuki did know more than she perhaps let on. For example, herself explaining to a perhaps more limited extent what Fuji says on these topics, and then Fuji herself can be used to fill in the blanks, allowing the audience to learn and but also not affecting the story's convincingness in the process. As unfortunately, while this does serve as a character flaw for Miyuki, it also serves as a writing flaw too. Perhaps in later volumes we could see Miyuki do some research herself into the different areas of animation, giving herself a head start so that she isn't so reliant on Fuji, as well as being a means for the audience to learn along with her, and so helping to remedy this problem. I'm hopeful that the story does try and consider this moving forward, as it definitely does infest you and does plenty right. However, at the moment I do want to strangle Miyuki sometimes. A fun character who I didn't expect to like due to his overall bland and unappealing design to me, sorry bro, but did end up liking, was Mr. Igarashi, who she even learns that despite his appearance in constant state of neglect, is actually Soji Igarashi, who is considered a god animator, partly because of his work on Royal Girl Panacotta. This reveal a funny one, and I've got a theory now that it was actually him leaving those purple notes as clues. Perhaps another cliche, the one character you least expect actually being the loudest one cheering from the sidelines, but still not a bad use of a cliche either. He also had his good comedic moments too, which worked well as the cherry on top for me. The previously mentioned Fuji and Kujo were also good characters too, although not much was revealed about them, especially Kujo. We do get some good glimpses of what they are like, however, through their interactions with other characters, especially from Miyuki of course. Fuji especially comes across as an engaging character as well, having her own funny moments too. She isn't written stereotypically to fit the role either, like she thinks she knows everything and thinks of herself as above others. Her character instead comes across as pretty believable and well written. Her rants are also good for character building, as her stern-faced attitude does come off a bit, as instead of being aimed at Miyuki and the other newbies Miyuki is working with, then it is instead being aimed at the animation industry as a whole. However, aside from this, the other two animators Miyuki works with are pretty bland and forgettable to me. They're not bad per se, the writing of the character and the dialogue comes across as pretty realistic and competent. It's just that these two characters, in themselves, at the moment at least, are pretty fucking forgettable because they're so fucking predictable. From the moment you see them, you know exactly what they're going to be like, from how they're being portrayed, and you're exactly fucking right. Hopefully, however, because the mangaka has surprised me with some of the other characters, and in the second volume she can do the same thing with these two. As it stands, however, they only work well to introduce us to more of Fuji's character through her frustrations with both of them and what this tells you about herself. It's also good because it means that Fuji's wrath isn't only directed at Miyuki, however. Her wrath being spread out and each of her critiques being justifiable does make you sympathise with her character more because of this too. However, because of this, they do just come across as good tools to push other characters forward rather than good characters in and of themselves. The comic nearly ended feel a bit unnecessary to me, but also understandable I guess. Its finding doesn't overstay its welcome. For some reason, the first page of it is put in the middle of the story, however, while the rest is in the back where the first page should be. It kind of just briefly interrupts the flow of the story, however, as it's just a single page in the middle of the story, then back to the story, and then when that's done it seems you remember the page in the middle where it left off. More of a small annoyance than anything else. Hopefully it's fixed up in later prints. The mangaka's persona, actually having an appearance as a plushie, having her own fan club in universe, and getting beat up by the lead as said plushie form, was also a funny detail however. In conclusion, ANIMETA Volume 1 was a fun and promising read. I'll definitely recommend it. I had my problems with some of the characters of course, but this could always just be fleshed out in later volumes. I'll definitely give Volume 2 a go myself, and perhaps write another review if it once again grips me enough, especially if the problems I've mentioned get reduced.